Long time ago, that was maybe in 2002, it was a long time ago, where Greenpeace activists were detained in Russia and put into solitary confinement for a long time, and it was painful for me to know that they were in there. And it just, as I try to want to help every living being on this planet, and in particular for me to see activists that want to help the world, that are kind-hearted and sensitive, to be locked up in there for being good people, for trying to help the whales, to be locked up there, not just locked up but in solitary confinement, me knowing how painful that is, for any living being, to be away from the contact of others and from love and touch and all of this. So I prayed for them. I was very worried. I petitioned to the infinite universe to bring help, to free these detainees. And not long after I petitioned and prayed, and then I also had to let go of that. I had to internally focus on something else. And then they were getting released. Then people paid to, or donations came in, and they paid to get these prisoners out. They had to pay them out. So it's bail them out. It's very, very, very dramatic and painful. So then journalists took photos of their faces, and it was the same facial expression that they had, that I saw in my own photos a lot throughout my life, from childhood to adulthood, the same facial expression. So I went like, okay, what do I have in common here with those people? And so it became quite clear what I had in common with the detainees was, of course, I'm caring as they are, but also, and that's the significant one, they were isolated and thrown on towards themselves and alone, and so this aloneness, this isolation, that is what created mostly this facial expression. It was the facial expression of total vulnerability, big eyes, like eyes that are of someone who is in fear, where you see a lot of white like this. Someone who feels completely exposed to the elements, someone who feels like they have no protection from anything or anyone around them, someone who is not understood, someone who is wrongfully accused, wrongfully punished, and wrongfully detained and isolated. And that is what I had in common with them. For me, in my life, it was not in a physical sense, but it was in a psychological sense. And so I understood that comparing my facial expression to theirs, that I have suffered a lot of isolation psychologically, because the people around me just could not relate to me, and I could not relate much to them. So wherever I was, wherever I have been in my life, I have never been able to relate very much, which created this fear and this vulnerability and this feeling of I have no escape, which then also later on made me go through different phases, like going through phases of excessive alcohol drinking and smoking and trying other kind of substances, Also just popping something that was in my mother's medical cabinet in conjunction with alcohol, escape mechanisms. It's too painful. I can't stand it. I need to drown myself. I need to drown that pain out, you know. Particularly the pain of not being understood and of being wrongfully punished, as in social rejection, as in social, you know, sometimes it's not even verbal, social disapproval, you know, so that's a punishment. And an outsider like myself suffers from that very, very much, because we are mammals, and every one of us, whether we have Asperger's or autism or whatever problems we have, depression or any kind of mental illness symptom, you know, or just being different, or being very artistic, or being very intuitive, being an empath, all of these things, you know, that sets us apart from the overall society of humans, of the majority of humans are not sensitive like this. The majority of humans are not questioning anything. They are not thrown onto themselves. And they use massive escape mechanisms all the time, and don't even think about it. It's not even a conscious thing. So I'm not accusing other people of consciously, deliberately, you know, looking the other way and accepting intolerable situations, because they themselves don't even notice that they are intolerable, because they have figured out to use escape modalities, and they happen to be the same escape modalities as the majority, so this is seen as normal, you know, when most humans are very neurotic, but this neuroticness is seen as the norm, thus normal, thus not being questioned. And so that's what the tragedy is of the norm. So I saw this parallel between me and the Greenpeace detainees and the people in the psychological experiment. We all had this facial expression of being like in shock, being vulnerable, having no escape mechanism available, totally exposed. And that's very painful, but then something else happens. Because of being thrown onto myself, I had that opportunity of being outside of shame and pride. That's tremendously empowering and liberating. That's the power. That is the power of being an outsider. I didn't really choose it, certainly not consciously in any way. It just happened that way. If I had that, the ability, as other people have, to, and I put it in quotation marks for a reason, because it is a neurotic thing. If I had the ability, like my mother or most people, to deny what doesn't feel good, just deny it. I'm just erasing it in my brain. It doesn't exist, but it's still there. It presses up, but you know, they are unconscious about it. So, and in denial, the whole thing is unconscious. The choosing to go into denial is an unconscious process. Okay? Once we become aware about this, it's no longer unconscious. Then we see what we're doing, and then in that moment, it stops because we recognize it. And then insights come, and then our life completely takes a complete different turn, sometimes a complete U-turn because of this. Some people see it as scary, but a catalyzing moment. It's a catharsis, and that happens often when people are really, really sick and face death. So that's when there's no escape, when they face something, really look it in the eye, which is what most people are constantly trying to avoid. So they try to avoid death, they try to avoid why they exist, and all these questions that are philosophical, that go very deep. So whenever I'd say to someone, I'm interested in philosophy, most people on the internet don't even know what that means, particularly people who are undereducated and anti-educated from third world countries or the Middle East. They don't know what it is. It's also forbidden, of course, in their religions and all of this, to ever introspect also. That's why religion is made by very neurotic people, for very neurotic people, to control very neurotic people, so that one or a few neurotic people can control all the other neurotic people. That's what religion is really designed for. And that's why if we dissolve religion, we are taking away one massive escape mechanism. Massive. And when we take that away, people are going to be faced with that what really is the truth. I am an animal. My dog is an animal just like me, sentient just like I am. I can't eat an animal anymore. Once that truth becomes that conscious, so then there's no escape anymore out of that realization and out of many other realizations. So I think this is very significant, this psychological test that the psychologist did, and it revealed a lot of things. She had some tremendous people in there as test people. She also consciously chose these people because she saw the potential in them, in what they might do with that time, and also to have different brains, to show how the different brains cope with these situations. And I'm not judging anyone. I'm not judging the Middle Eastern guy or anyone. Those people are. It's just, I hope the Middle Eastern guy had some insights about this, and isn't just feeling defeated now because he didn't make it through the 5 days. I think this having to get out of there should have told him something. Should have told him that his parents were, as I assume, cruel, psychologically not available to him, cruel, just plain and simply cold and cruel. Okay, and this stuff comes up in isolation. It comes up, and people will fight against it. They don't want that to come into consciousness. They will even give this a different picture. It comes up in nightmares sometimes. The brain will give it a picture. The brain will come up with monstrous images to depict that kind of feeling. A feeling that doesn't have a face, really. A monstrous feeling of loneliness and isolation during childhood. It doesn't even have a face. It doesn't even have a shape. But it will keep coming up in later adult life. It comes up in nightmares, giving it horrible, horrible images. It comes up in people creating horror movies. If you dig down and find out why he wrote this horror movie, why he put it into this image and this particular shape, you will see the reasons. It's a symbolic, it's a psychogram. It's symbolic for all kinds of things. Sexual abuse, most of all, that's what most people had. It's real common. It's much more common than people want to believe. Not just among Catholic priests. They are just, this is just one specific group of people where it revealed itself due to the situation. But it's going on in all kinds. In straight people and gay people, in this culture and that culture and that society, it wouldn't matter. And the more people are trying to actually control it, you know, with their brains or with their willpower, the more it starts pushing up, the more the urge pushes it. So when people have that kind of urge, it is absolutely, absolutely mandatory for those people to go to a very good psychotherapist. It's better than nothing, okay? I mean, they're also not perfect, of course, and there's still much to learn, but it's better than not doing it. And they must get into it. They must become aware. They must talk to someone about this, whether it is unconscious or conscious. They must talk about their fears, and most people have fears that they are aware of. So that's an entry point. That's where it goes deep into the childhood. Okay, we have to start here in the present. That we can't dig in from underneath. That's locked up. Okay, it's like a cylinder. We have to go into the top, and that's the present moment. And then we get to the real core reasons that have put us into any kind of neurotic situation that we are in right now in our current lives. So I think these are very, very important reflections to make, and it feels good for me to talk about it. And so I'm gonna put this video together now. Okay, you guys take care. Bye bye.